Hi there, and welcome to the Pain Free Comeback Program. My name is Alec, and in this video, I'm going to share my recovery story with you to share what's possible doing this work and why it's so important to me. So let's dive in. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you have had dreams or hopes dashed as a result of chronic pain, or whatever symptoms you're dealing with. I'm going to share my story. When I was 18 years old, I wanted to be a professional cyclist. It was what my life revolved around. I was eat, sleep, breathe, cycling. And I remember I was out on a training ride one day. I was on a team that was pretty high level development team. Some of my former teammates went on to become national champions, world champions, even Olympians. And I was getting ready to do a couple of the biggest races that I had ever done. One was a 100-mile road race on a Saturday in the pro field. And on Sunday, I was going to be doing a race that Lance Armstrong had won 2 years prior. And I had just entered this new category and was racing against people who were incredibly fast, incredibly good. And a few weeks before these races, I was out on a training ride, just riding along. I was out of the saddle, my bike was going back and forth, and all of a sudden, I just felt this rippling pain through my back. It was as if somebody stuck a lightning rod in the middle of my back and was twisting my spine from end to end. My back seized up to the point where I was unable to sit back down on my bike seat and actually bend my back. It was so intense. I got home and iced my back. I heated it. A couple days later, I saw a chiropractor, and he told me, "Don't worry. In 2 weeks, you're going to be back on top." Well, 2 weeks went by, and I was still in immense amount of pain. Was unable to do those big races, and then slowly another couple weeks went by, and another, and pretty soon my entire racing season was lost to this pain, which instead of actually getting better was getting progressively worse, and I didn't know what was happening. I had to return to college, and at that time I couldn't actually sit through any of my lectures. I had so much pain while sitting. It wasn't just on the bike, it was with me from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. And it was about 6 months after my original pain that I was put into an MRI and given a diagnosis that I suffered a ruptured L4, L5 spinal disc and a herniated L5, S1. I was prescribed physical therapy. I went to a chiropractor. I tried every physical treatment to get better. I even had two sets of nerve root injections where they stick a giant needle in your back and they inject they inject steroids in order to quell the pain. I remember the lowest point of my journey was after suffering through a semester of school. I had my second nerve root block procedure, and about for about 36 hours, the pain went away, and then it came back stronger than ever before. My parents had to come pick me up from college, and I remember the feeling of lying in the back seat of their car because I couldn't sit down. I had to lie down in the back seat, and they drove me home. After that, I spent a few months mostly bedridden. I was in bed, the only posture that I could be in without being in pain, or I would be eating my meals standing up. And I went to more and more physical therapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, holistic practitioners, you name it, I went to it. And my pain was just getting worse. I was on strong opioids, and felt like I was numbing myself out, and I felt really hopeless, and I felt an amount of despair, seeing as an 18-year-old my life crumbling around me. The friends that I thought would be there for me, they were moving on and doing other things, and I felt really alone and really isolated, and was terrified that this was going to be my reality for the rest of my life. This was in the middle of the recession in the United States. My parents were not high income earners, and I felt like such a burden to the family. And I even contemplated suicide a few times because I didn't see a way out. Thankfully, things started to change about a year after my initial pain. I Finally discovered a physical therapist who was not up to date with all of this mind body stuff that we're covering in this course, but he taught me not to fear my pain. And that was really important. I remember going into him and he had me do an exercise. It was like a squat exercise. And I did one and I said, "Oh, I have pain." And he looked at me, this bald, kind of no nonsense guy, and he said, "So what?" And it was at that moment I started to decouple my pain from the fear of pain. And I started to get a little bit better, return to some physical activity. And somebody gave me a book. It was called Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno. It was actually at a party. They said, uh, "Do you consider yourself to be an angry or an emotional person?" And I said, "No, that's ridiculous." This person proceeded to tell me how pain is not always generated from a structural abnormality, but from repressed emotions or negative thought patterns, pressure that we put on ourselves. And I thought to myself the whole time, that is BS. I've seen my MRI. I've seen how my juice of my spinal disc is leaking out. You can't tell me that that's not causing my pain. So I dismissed it. And then some interesting things started to happen. I started to question what was really happening with my pain. It had decreased a little bit to the point where I could resume some physical activity, go on a bike ride, but I was still in a lot of pain day to day. But I started to question why, on the days when I would do everything that my medical team told me to do, ice my back, be horizontal, not put too much pressure on it, all the stretching, core exercises. Why on those days could I have more pain than the days when I was doing things that they said not to do, like sitting too much or not using my electrostimulation unit? And I started to question what was really going on. Was my pain actually structural? It's when I came back to that book after my mom had given it to me, Healing Back Pain. And I read it and I started to see myself on every page. I started to see how my perfectionism, my people pleasing, my catastrophizing, my low self esteem was creating this concoction of emotions within me that I was refusing to address. I started to see how I was using cycling to fill this void of not feeling enough, and how the threat of not performing well in these really big races was a huge threat to my ego and to my sense of identity, how I could have been made fun of by teammates or friends if I didn't perform well. And it was a complete 180-degree change in my life. Within a number of weeks, my pain started to dissipate, and actually all shifted into my upper back. And I realized that's the point when I was like, okay, I have it on the run. And within a number of weeks, that pain actually dissipated. But then some other things started to happen. I started to get shin splints, despite the fact that I was running a very, very small amount. I started to get pain in my arm, or I would have pain urinating, and all of these weird sorts of symptoms, numbness, things that would come up that I would get checked out that had no medical explanation. They were still happening. And after each time, I was treating them in the same way. I was treating them as this mind body non-structural uh, chronic pain. But it was almost as if these were a call inward, that it was like my mind or my brain, my body were saying to me that until you really go inward and deal with some of this stuff at a deeper level, you are going to have this pain pop up. And so that's what I did. I really started to turn inward. I got into meditation. I got into really looking inside myself. There was a time when I actually considered becoming a monk. I was meditating 3.5 hours a day. And as a result of looking inward, the journey became less about becoming pain free and more about really deeply understanding myself and personal transformation. And yes, I'm happy to report that I have not had any chronic back pain, or really any back pain to speak of, in over a decade. And there's no physical activity that I'm unable to do, despite the fact that if you were to do an MRI of my spine today, you'd probably still see a ruptured spinal disc. But what was really transformational was the way that I was relating to myself. I started to see pain in a completely different way. Before I saw, everything is structural. I would catastrophize it. I had this fear that my body was weak and fragile. I've dropped all of that. This journey showed me how I was the architect of making myself miserable, right? With this low self-esteem and people pleasing, and how I could start to shift that and change that. It completely upended how I see the world and how people limit themselves, how society has beliefs that we collectively consume and that limit us. And of course, learning about this and becoming pain free didn't solve all my problems, but it made me realize that it's really up to me to solve them, and that I have the tools, and that I can be a lighthouse, not just for myself, but for others who are struggling. And throughout the journey, I had an idea of returning to cycling, and I actually did return to competition for a while, but just to prove to myself that I could do it. I knew that something had changed within me and that I didn't want to be a professional cyclist anymore. Instead, I knew that long term, I wanted to dedicate my life to helping people achieve the same transformation that I did, knowing that it is possible for the hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people who suffer from chronic pain. And that is really why I see this whole experience as such a gift. It gave me my life's purpose. I wouldn't be here speaking to you today if this had not occurred. And how so much of our healing happens from the inside out. I now no longer look to, pills or procedures or treatments external to me as a first resort for healing something. I really see how the power to heal comes from within. And throughout this journey, I've been constantly amazed by how strong my body actually is. For example, I ran a marathon without training, which would have been unfathomable to me. Not just doing one without training, but to do a marathon at all, because I had all these beliefs that my body were weak, that were really not based on anything concrete. So the transformational power of this journey is really what has inspired me to serve others in the same way that I was served. So throughout this course, my encouragement to you would be not to just see it as something that can get rid of your pain. Yes, that can and probably will happen if you are here and you put in the time, but see it as something that is so much more. It's not just about that, but really about this transformation that can occur. Because if you're open to it, the way that you see your body, the way that you see your life, and the way that you see healing will be fundamentally altered. That's what happened for me. And I believe it can happen for you too. So thank you for listening to my story. And I really look forward to seeing you in the program.